shine a bright light on the exorbitant amounts of money that taxpayers provide each year for abortions. I ask my colleagues to stand beside our colleague from Indiana in this fight by voting a resounding yes on his amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I do not believe that the government should interfere with the reproductive rights of a woman. But that's not what's being debated here. No matter how many times our friends on the other side of the aisle say that this is an amendment meant to prevent federal dollars from going to fund abortions, no matter how many times they say it will not make it true, will not make it so. That's not what this is about. But we've heard all of the statistics. We know what this is about. I'd like to spend a moment talking about how this whole debate is viewed around the country. I'd like to spend a minute talking about what the country ought to look like for my daughters and for my son. Because in this amendment, we can envision a nation where there might be a place for education to be taught in a scientific and comprehensive way. Sex education that might actually reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies, that might actually reduce teen pregnancies and keep our American children and young women healthy. We might actually envision a country where we have testing for sexually transmitted diseases, where if caught we can help make the nation healthier. And we can also envision a nation where there are opportunities. Madam Chair, the House is not in order.
Gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. Would members please take their conversations from the floor? The gentleman deserves to be heard. The House is not in order. Gentleman may resume.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we also have an opportunity here tonight to think about a nation where women have the opportunity to seek the health care that they need and deserve. Poor women, oftentimes, who might have no place else to go, but have an opportunity to get the health care they need, to get the cancer screenings they need that can save their lives. We can envision all of these things in this amendment. And ladies and gentlemen, we know what Planned Parenthood provides in these clinics. 95% of what they provide is health care that does exactly what we want done in this country. 95% of what Planned Parenthood does helps keep Americans healthy, helps take care of women, helps make sure that they're better mothers, helps make sure that their families can be taken care of, helps identify cancer before it's too late so that kids can grow up with their mothers. We understand what this amendment is about. This is not an amendment about abortion. This is an amendment about clamping down on a clinic that provides medical services whose politics those on the other side simply do not agree with. This is about the opportunity to move forward with something that can provide those health care services, with clinics that can help save lives. We can do all of that right here in this House. Members, I ask that as we go forward today, we think about the opportunity we have here to cast a vote that supports women, to cast a vote that supports families, and to take what will be the most pro-family vote we have an opportunity to cast in this CR debate. That is a vote against this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do so. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
I move to strike the last word, Madam Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I rise in support of the Pence Amendment for a number of reasons. As was indicated, I do come from the state of Kansas, and in listening to the debate this evening, it's rather interesting to find very little support for actually the institution of Planned Parenthood and a full discussion of what they have been involved in. 2 days ago in the state of Kansas, another hearing was conducted. Charges are moving forward. 107 criminal charges against Planned Parenthood. It's very interesting that an entity under criminal indictment for covering up more than 100 crimes, failure to report, helping cover up incest, rape, the list goes on and on. It's happened in multiple states. A young lady by the name of Lila Rose has indicated, if you don't believe me, take a look at the tapes, Madam Chairman. Take a look at the tapes of how Planned Parenthood is helping sexual predators continue their activities. Madam Chairman, I also like to point out that one thing that we cannot forget, I must admit, I'm certainly disappointed that our Supreme Court somehow claims there is a right to abortion. But we do know there is no right to the public treasury. There is no right to the taxpayer dollar. There is no right to demand that Americans front this organization with their taxpayer money. That's the question in this amendment, Madam Chairman. The other question to face here, and we need to be very clear, and I do, my wife and I have 4 adopted children, and they're watching tonight, but they're adopted children, and they come from a group of children. The history of Planned Parenthood has targeted minorities. My children are adopted. It's the very type of children this organization, and there's evidence, it still continues today. Undercover work has shown again and again how this organization locates in minority neighborhoods. Madam Chairman, it's not only fiscally irresponsible to send our taxpayer dollars to this type of entity and organization. I think it's morally reprehensible that we would send $300 million of our hard-earned money to an entity that targets minorities, that helps sexual predators, that continues to cover up rape and incest and sex slavery. There is no excuse for that. Everyone in this body should be standing on their feet and recognizing, no matter your position on the issue of abortion, we should all agree our taxpayer dollars are undeserving of the efforts of Planned Parenthood. The history is clear. The present is clear. It's time to defund this entity. They are unworthy of our dollars. With that, Madam Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Chair, I ask to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be remiss if I did not thank the Speaker, Speaker Boehner, for the open rule that we have been working under for the past several days. Even though we haven't agreed on much, probably not anything, I do appreciate the fact that we've been able to have an open and fair debate and a full debate on some of the most profound issues of our time. Now, I am hoping earnestly that this is not the last open rule we have. I know that it's turned 3 days of debate into about 6 or 7 days of debate, and there's been a lot of hot air in this chamber. I think if this chamber were a hot air balloon, we could probably make Europe. But I do think that there is credit due to the Speaker for allowing this debate to occur. I do want to remind the members, in spite of some of the pronouncements of the previous Speaker, that there is fixed law that prevents federal funding to be used for abortion. That's really not what this is about. This is about the ability of Planned Parenthood to conduct women's health care, to offer services that are deeply needed in many communities where no other source of health care is available. Planned Parenthood last year carried out 1 million screenings for cervical cancer and 830,000 breast exams and offered nearly 4 million tests and treatments for STDs, including HIV. Those are the services they provide. They are prohibited by law, by the Hyde Amendment, from using federal funds for abortion. That's a fact. That is a fact. You can be entitled to your own opinion, but that is a fact. And as a
Gentleman deserves to be heard. Gentleman may resume.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm a pro-life Democrat. I'm a pro-life Democrat, and my faith informs my position on this issue. And there used to be, I think, a general agreement, as divisive as this debate is, and has been in this country for years, there's been a level of agreement that we have reached where I think we agreed at one point in this country that the best way to reduce abortion in this country is to prevent unwanted pregnancies. We used to agree on that. This bill, this amendment, will increase the number of abortions in this country. The heart of what Planned Parenthood does is in the area of contraceptives and of medical screenings for cervical cancer and breast cancer. But contraception is a big part of what they do in trying to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies in this country. And if we take the funding away from them, and it says all funding, it doesn't distinguish, all funding under Title X is prohibited from Planned Parenthood. So let's not play a game about what you're against and what you're for. This is for all funding. That's what the bill says. And if you prevent Planned Parenthood from providing advice and services on contraception, we know for a certainty, especially in the communities that they provide services to, we're going to have an increase in the number of abortions in this country. That is the natural consequence of what is on the table here in this amendment. You're going to reduce funding for contraception, you're going to have more unwanted pregnancies, and you're going to have more abortions. Is that what this debate is about? Is that what we're trying to do here? I used to think it was different. I thought we had some level of agreement on this, that the goal was to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies, and that's how we were going to reduce abortions in this country. I am disheartened by this amendment. I would wish that the gentleman would withdraw this amendment, because I think it's counterproductive to the goal of reducing the number of abortions in this country. And as a family who's been affected by cervical cancer and breast cancer, I think that's very important work that they do, and I support that. I don't have many friends in the Planned Parenthood community. They don't support me. I'm pro-life. But I respect the good work that they do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
What purpose? For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Asked to address the House for 5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 5. Does the gentleman move to strike the last word?
I do indeed.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do rise in support of the Pence Amendment, and I am aware of some very helpful work that Planned Parenthood has done to help some women with some difficult medical issues. But we've heard discussion here about a bill of attainder. And of course, Article 1, Section 9, Paragraph 3 says, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law will be passed. That's the Constitution. A bill of attainder, according to William Rehnquist, is, quote, a legislative act that singles out one or more persons and imposes punishment on them without benefit of trial. No one is being found guilty of a crime here. I know about those things. I have found people guilty of crimes after a trial. That's not what's happening here, any more than it was what was happening when people decided to defund Guantanamo Bay or defund Acorn because they were complicit in encouraging prostitution. To come in here and say that when this body finds that one entity does not deserve to be receiving more money that was pried out of taxpayers' hand is somehow a bill of attainder, then it means we can never withdraw money from someone from whom it was given previously. That's not a bill of attainder. And in fact, to take it away, one would first have to assume that this money was the property of this entity before they ever received it. Now, to say that would be to say that taxpayers that earned the money and the taxpayers that had to give it up because we stole it, but we legalized the theft because we can do that. We can say, you earned it, it's yours, but we have the power to legalize taking it away from you against your will. We've done that. We've taken it away. But we have a responsibility to be frugal and to be wise with that. No, I won't. I didn't ask to be yielded when I was being upset by the explanation inappropriately of a bill of attainder. But I know the gentleman is one of the smartest people I know. But this is not a bill of attainder. The F-35 we voted on, a second engine. Well, there'd been money appropriated supposedly before. We talked about, we passed things. They could come in and say, well, it's a bill of attainder to take it away. It is not. It is not their money. This body has an obligation to investigate, to look carefully about where we should most appropriately spend the taxpayers' money that we've taken away, or the money 42 cents out of the dollar now we're borrowing from China or whoever will give us the money. But it was never the intention of the founders that we could not be responsible as a body and say this shouldn't go to this place, it would be better served going somewhere else. That is our job, and we have an obligation. And one other thing, to those who say, and I know well-meaning because I know these people who are saying it, and I know their hearts, and I knew they really believed what they were saying. But I've got part one of the Act to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to modify the first-time home buyer's credit in the case of members of the armed forces and certain other federal employees and for other purposes, which is Obamacare. Because the Senate stripped out every word of the bill, including the title, substituted therefore Obamacare. This is the first half of the bill. And if you turn over to page 119, capital B subsection, it says abortions for which public funding is prohibited. But if you go to subsection little 2I, it has this title, abortions for which public funding is allowed. That's not all. Legal clinics are financed and are required to be financed under this bill, and there is no prohibition either by the Hyde Amendment or any provision in this bill or the executive order that legally prevents federal funding for allowing abortions in some of those medical clinics that are established and will happen. Also, if you flip over here, and you wouldn't find this in a word search for abortion because it was too cleverly put back, but if you look at 122, it is required to have insurance plans, and there will be federal funding involved to make this happen, that there be, and quote, at least one such plan that provides coverage of services described in clauses little I1 and 2 little I of subsection capital B.
Ms. Expired.
That's abortion, folks. There's money for it here. Thank you.
For what purpose does gentlewoman from New York rise?
I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in strong opposition to the Pence Amendment, which will eliminate all funding for the many services provided by Planned Parenthood. That is the amendment that is before us, not the other items other people are talking about. This amendment is not merely anti-choice. It is also anti-health, anti-woman, and anti-poor, and is a thinly veiled attack on birth control. This amendment will not do anything to grow our economy or create any new jobs to help us out of this great recession. It will only turn this nation backward. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest provider of family planning services, and for roughly 60% of their patients, they serve as the primary care physicians. 90% of the health care they provide every day is primary and preventive. This is not about abortion. The Hyde Amendment is alive and well, and it prevents and restricts any use of federal funds for abortion. This is about primary and preventive health care. This anti-woman amendment will restrict millions of women from access to family planning, HIV testing and counseling, and breast and cervical cancer screening, leaving them with nowhere else to turn. The other side's vision of smaller government would expand the government's power over women's choices. It is wrong, it is short-sighted, and it is unjust. Instead of getting between a woman and her doctor, instead of allowing women to have control over their own health care, instead of forcing personal beliefs on half the population, let's turn to the business of creating jobs and economic opportunity and away from the business of ruling other people's lives. I urge a no vote on the Pence Amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Alabama rise?
Madam Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentlewoman from Alabama is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in support to the amendment. I oppose funding to Planned Parenthood. We should not be giving federal funds to groups like Planned Parenthood that use the money for abortions. Planned Parenthood has recently made plain the centrality of abortion to its mission, mandating that every affiliate have at least one clinic performing abortions within the next 2 years. Additionally, it is beyond shocking that Planned Parenthood employees were recently found on video aiding and abetting in the alleged sex trafficking of minors. This is not the first time that Planned Parenthood has shown such shocking behavior. It happened in my home state of Alabama back in 2009. A Planned Parenthood counselor was caught on hidden camera telling an alleged 14-year-old statutory rape victim that the clinic does sometimes bend the rules a little bit, rather than report sexual abuse to state authorities. 2 years later, we are still seeing this outrageous behavior by Planned Parenthood employees. It is time to stop funding such an organization with taxpayer dollars. Planned Parenthood ignores statutory rape law reporting, pushes abortion procedures, and opposes any effort to elevate the legal status of a fetus at any stage of development. It is not a proud day that citizens learn that these activities have been continually funded by the federal government. It is even a worse day when we are told that our government has funded Planned Parenthood with more than $363 million in government grants and contracts. The continual action by Planned Parenthood and its employees is demeaning for women and a black eye for our society. Planned Parenthood in Kansas claims to be a trusted source of health care and education for thousands of women, men, and children, yet it was charged with 107 criminal counts, including failure to report sexual abuse and falsifying documents in order to perform illegal late-term abortions. Planned Parenthood in California has privately admitted to overcharging the state and federal governments by at least $180 million for birth control pills, despite internal and external warnings that its billing practices were improper. Planned Parenthood in Indiana has been accused of endangering the safety and well-being of minor girls by intentionally circumventing state parental involvement laws and breaking state law by refusing to report statutory rape. Funding must be stopped. Planned Parenthood must not be granted any more taxpayers' dollars to push their agenda to take away the rights of the unborn. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Pence Amendment and stop funding of Planned Parenthood. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I don't doubt that the gentleman from Indiana is sincere. We all know him, and we know the long-standing commitment that he has had to this issue. But having served on the Judiciary Committee with the late Chairman Henry Hyde, I know how sincere he was and the work that he did to ensure that no federal funds could be used for abortion. That is the law of the land. I also know how committed our colleague from Massachusetts is to his values of pro-life. But he eloquently stood on the floor of the House and gave us a moral compass. This is not about abortion. This is about saving lives. And the Planned Parenthood effort, albeit with ills that any large organization may have, corrected ills, has a valuable and worthy purpose in saving lives. My fear is, with the Pence Amendment having the potential of passing, that we set the stage for going back 10, 20, 30, 40 years when women had no place to seek counseling. They know well that the adherence to the law that the Planned Parenthood organization must have is that they cannot use federal funds for abortion. But this is not about abortion. This is about family planning and counseling services that have long since been part of the Planned Parenthood family. And all we'll do by cutting these resources will be, in fact, going back to the dark ages when young women had no place to go. So Planned Parenthood does not equate to abortion. Family planning does not equate to abortion. Title X funds does not equate to abortion, because the law of the land is clear. But what we will have are young women who will have no place to go to be able to ask questions. Yes, the Planned Parenthood facility is in the 18th Congressional District in Houston, Texas, a heavily diverse but heavily minority district. And I would argue that its efforts are positive in health education, the work it does in Pap tests for cervical cancer, in STD testing, in menopause and hormone treatment, in urinary tract infection treatment, in breast exams, and in outreach to the Latino community, all services that would not be there if it was not for these committed workers and the committed office of Planned Parenthood. Community health clinics to be gutted. And as was indicated, all the work that we're doing on the floor of the House, the question has to be, one, are we going forward and helping the American people create jobs? Or even in this amendment, causing thousands of Americans to lose their jobs in a worthy cause of helping those who many times cannot help themselves? What about those who suffered a violent act of sexual assault? Where do they go? What do we say about a Planned Parenthood who throughout its existence over the last couple of decades have received violent threats, bomb threats? I'm reminded of the police support that this local chapter had to have because of the constant threats upon their staff. So this is not all peaches and roses. We're simply standing here and saying, allow them to do their work, which is assisting a young woman by the name of Karen, 28 years old, who was between jobs, newly married, and did not have any health care, and missed or saw a pregnancy test that she got from the drugstore and couldn't believe what it said. She didn't know where else to go. She was frightened. 28 years old, but she went to Planned Parenthood. And what she said, without any pressure, she had the test and discovered that she was pregnant. And the nurse didn't ask her any indicting questions, simply said, what do you want to do? And she thought about it, and she decided to say she wanted to have the baby. Don't let those stories go untold, where women are counseled and they go forth with their plans with the idea that they have someone to help them along, even provide them with services to be able to carry that baby to term. So I simply want to say they've suffered enough violence for Planned Parenthood. Let's not have more violence on the floor of the House, and let's vote down this particular amendment to continue them serving the women that need to be served. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
To strike the last word.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise in strong support of the Pence Amendment. It's important to note that the Hyde Amendment has been in place for decades. There's overwhelming support among the American people that we don't want our tax dollars used to subsidize or support abortion in any way. And people listening to the debate tonight, those on the floor, pro-life Democrats, no matter who you are, shouldn't be distracted by the discussion of the health care services provided by the organization Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood could solve this public policy problem they've got that by simply refusing to perform abortions. If they stop performing abortions, this is not an issue. If Planned Parenthood would stop turning a blind eye or at best stop being indifferent to the criminal conduct that's been exposed at their facilities and lead the charge to see that criminal complaints are sworn out against these against people associated with Planned Parenthood or their employees engaged in criminal conduct, a lot of this problem would go away. All Planned Parenthood has to do is say they're going to stop performing abortions, and yet they won't do it. This is not about the health care services that they provide in other areas. This is about the fact that the overwhelming majority of Americans do not want our tax dollars used to subsidize or pay for abortions. This is a very straightforward vote tonight for all of the members of the House, whether or not you will vote to permit your constituents' tax dollars to be used to fund or subsidize abortion. That's the question before the House tonight. It's not complicated, and Planned Parenthood is not entitled to these dollars, these tax dollars, or there's no punishment being given here. Planned Parenthood, we as a Congress will make the public policy decision here tonight in this debate, in this vote, whether or not Planned Parenthood should continue to receive tax dollars. That's been decided for decades. No tax dollars should be used to subsidize or fund abortion. That's been the position of the Congress through the Hyde Amendment for many, many decades, and we're continuing that tradition tonight by ensuring that no tax dollars flow through Obamacare, which, by the way, does allow our tax dollars to be used for abortion, because what is not excluded is included, and the Obamacare bill allows for our tax dollars to be used for abortion by subsidizing exchange plans that provide coverage for abortion. Therefore, this vote is truly very simple. Will we, the Congress of the United States, permit our tax dollars to be used to subsidize or fund abortion? It's an up or down vote. And I want to yield the balance of my time, Madam Speaker, to the gentleman from Georgia.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Make no mistake about it.
Gentleman from Texas must remain on his feet. Excuse me.
Ma'am.
You may proceed.
Make no mistake about it. This is about abortion. Just prior to coming to the floor tonight, before this debate ever began, I was answering an email I got from a friend of mine in Atlanta, and he said, "Stop public funding of abortion." And I was talking to him on the phone when I saw Mr. Pence come down here and start this debate. And he was telling me about his sister-in-law that had an abortion about 30 years ago. She has nightmares. She has visions of these 2 babies that she aborted. I'm a medical doctor. I've performed all these health services that my Democratic colleagues keep talking about, and I have for years. I like women. I'm married to one. I have 2 daughters. I have thousands of patients that I've seen over the years. And I've done pap smears and breast examinations and sexually transmitted disease tests and all those health care services that my Democrat colleagues keep talking about. This is not about that. We keep hearing about the Hyde Amendment. And certainly the Hyde Amendment is in place. But make no mistake about this. What Planned Parenthood does is does the proverbial shell game, shifting funds. So taxpayer dollars still go to an organization that provides abortion. And the more we pour money to this organization, the more abortions they're going to try to promote and provide. And in fact, Planned Parenthood was established on the philosophy of eugenics. And they're still carrying out that philosophy. There are more black babies killed through abortion today proportionally than there are white babies or any other colored babies. And we've also seen tapes where Planned Parenthood operatives have even promoted that type of thing. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So this is all about preventing abortion. I know my Democrat colleagues are well-meaning. They all say the same talking points, and I believe in the depths of my heart that y'all really believe what the Democratic colleagues say. And I know they're well-meaning. But the American people demand better. My patients demand better. The taxpayers, your taxpayers, Democratic colleagues, demand better. This is about abortion. Planned Parenthood is not going to shut down if the Pence Amendment is passed and this continuing resolution is signed into law. Planned Parenthood won't go away. They can continue to supply the services that they get from other financial sources. They can continue to provide abortions. So it's not going to even stop that. I believe very firmly in my heart that we must stop abortions because these are babies. I introduced H.R. 212, which is the Sanctity of Human Life Act, that defines life beginning at fertilization. And I know as a medical doctor, that's when my life began, that's when all of our lives began. Those babies deserve the right of personhood. They deserve the right to live. So this debate is about life. It's about giving children the right to grow up and become functioning citizens in our society. And it's about taxpayers' funds continuing to support an organization, the largest provider of abortions in the world, to continue that process of killing babies. So we must take the taxpayer funds away. It's not going to stop Planned Parenthood from doing pap smears, breast examinations, STD exams, all those things that my Democrat colleagues keep talking about. It's not going to stop that. What it will do is just take taxpayers' dollars out of the equation. Planned Parenthood can no longer do the cost shifting, use taxpayer dollars for other purposes besides the stated purpose of abortion. And hopefully they won't continue to provide abortions with taxpayer dollars. It's not fair to taxpayers. It's not fair to women. It's not fair to my patients. It's not fair to even the Planned Parenthood's patients that are not seeking abortions. I encourage my colleagues, let's have some sanity here. Let's have some civility here. Let's think about what really this is all about. It's about abortion, not providing health services to underprivileged women. I've provided those services. I've given away hundreds of thousands of dollars of my services of an almost 4-decade career practicing family medicine. I care for my patients. I want them to have the services that they need. I've provided those services. But this is about abortion. Let's stop the funding of Planned Parenthood by taxpayers' dollars. Let them do their business until we outlaw abortion. Hopefully we can, because it's killing babies. You see, I don't believe that God can continue to bless America while we're killing 4,000 babies every day. We treat green turtle eggs better than we treat human being babies in the womb. We've got to stop it. That's the reason I support the Pence Amendment. That's the reason I hope all my colleagues and the American public will demand a stopping of the public funding of abortions through Planned Parenthood by supporting the Pence Amendment. I yield back, Madam Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Wisconsin rise?
Madam Chair, I would like to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would plead with my colleagues to reject the Pence Amendment and not to defund Planned Parenthood. And I mean that as a double entendre, to not defund the ability of women to plan parenthood. I know of what the previous speaker, the gentleman, referred to, all those well-meaning people who want to speak about the value of life and not funding contraception and not wanting to make an abortion, which is the law of the land, available if people would choose that. I am really touched by the passion of the opposite, you know, to want to save black babies. I can tell you I know a lot about having black babies. I've had 3 of them. And I had my first one when I was 18 years old, at the ripe old age of 18.
Members take their conversations off the floor. Gentlewoman may resume.
I thank you for that courtesy, Madam Chair. I had my first baby at the ripe old age of 18, an unplanned pregnancy. And let me tell you, I went into labor, unfortunately, on New Year's Eve, had not even one dime. Phone calls cost a dime at that time. I didn't have a phone in my home and didn't have a dime to go to the phone booth to call an ambulance which is a waste of money, using Medicaid dollars, but I didn't have a car and didn't have cab fare. I just want to tell you a little bit about what it's like to not have Planned Parenthood. You have to add water to the formula to make it stretch. You have to give your kids ramen noodles at the end of the month to fill up their little bellies so that they won't cry. You have to give them mayonnaise sandwiches. They get very few fresh fruits and vegetables because they're expensive. It subjects children to low educational attainment because of the ravages of poverty. You know, one of the biggest problems that school districts have in educating some of these poor black children who are unplanned is that they're mobile. They're constantly moving because they can't pay the rent. And yes, I heard many of you talk about sexual predators. It subjects them to sexual predators, as when you try to go out and do a little work, you have to leave your kids with just anybody because you don't have $800 to $1,200 a month for child care. And let me tell you, you know, the public policy has treated poor children and women who have not had the benefit of Planned Parenthood with utter contempt. These same children, it has been very difficult to get them health insurance through CHIPS. When you go to the grocery store to buy them a little birthday cake with your food stamps, everyone stares with you in contempt. And yes, on a bipartisan basis, Democrats and Republicans ended the entitlement to aids for families with dependent children, so that when we have a recession like we have now, women who are alone, typically, poor, of color, with these poor black children, have no money, go months and months and months with little or nothing to sustain themselves. And I recall that the first item on the U-Cut website was to cut temporary assistance to needy families. And let me tell you what it does to women who cannot plan their parenthood. It derails their ability to complete education and training so that they can get a job. The TANF law It's very harsh. Won't even let women complete high school diplomas. It sends them into workfare programs and very low-wage service industries, often jobs with no unemployment benefits. And, of course, they're treated with contempt and disdain when they apply for any aid. They're humiliated. And so I would beg my colleagues, I would beg them to not defund Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is healthy for women, it's healthy for children, and it's healthy for our society. And I would yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the United States, receives millions of dollars in government aid, yet they are still classified as a nonprofit organization. From 2008 to 2009, Planned Parenthood received $363 million, which is a third of their $1 billion income from grants and contracts from federal and state governments. And during that time, the number of abortions that they performed increased to a record number of 324,000. That's almost 25,000 from 2006 to 2007. And each fiscal year since 2000, the government has increased its funding an average of $22 million per year, while the number of abortions they performed steadily increased. This occurred while the overall abortion rate in the United States declined. And despite all of this, we continue to give this organization money, millions, despite reports that Planned Parenthood clinics have failed to comply with state statutory rape reporting laws, often ignoring parental consent laws, and most recently, a few have refused to report instances of sex trafficking of minors. Simple fact, funding Planned Parenthood and its affiliates does not decrease abortion, it increases it. When I think of Planned Parenthood, I'm immediately reminded of a night 20 years ago when I was working in the emergency room at Hendersonville Hospital. A 22-year-old girl presented after receiving an incomplete abortion from a Planned Parenthood clinic. She had no follow-up number, and she didn't know where to go to receive the care that she needed. Unfortunately, she waited at home bleeding for hours before coming to the emergency room, but it was too late. And due to the excessive bleeding loss in her body, responded by an uncontrollable clotting condition known as the IC. And at this point, there was nothing we could do. We watched this young girl die. This young girl, with her whole life ahead of her, died that night. Stories like these are the everyday tragedies that go untold. That is why I stand here this hour to show my support for this amendment and for all of the continuing efforts to defund Planned Parenthood. I thank the gentleman from Indiana for introducing this vital amendment. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Mr. Speaker, to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has been an interesting debate as we look at the 150th years back in history and we look at the Civil War. And as we look back at the Civil War, some people reenacting it as if it was a good event, we look at kind of a retreat in history here tonight. It was 1965 when Griswold v. Connecticut in a 7-2 Supreme Court decision said that it was Planned Parenthood could not be prohibited by the government from giving contraceptive advice to married people. And we've come a long way since then in terms of liberties. And I'm kind of surprised as we get here in 2011 and we look at this House and part of this House which claims to be so concerned about liberty and individual freedoms and individual rights,
is more hung up on the 10th Amendment and something to do with states and federals rather than the 9th Amendment and the penumbral right that gives women and individuals the right to make certain decisions. And we've got a group over here that's really concerned about earmarks, and yet what this is, I would submit, it's not a bill of attainder, it's a reverse earmark, because you're saying who we can't give money to. And the logic that I've heard from my friend from Georgia was that because even though we have the Hyde Amendment, which says Planned Parenthood can't use federal funds for abortion, because they do other Planned Parenthood activities, helping with HIV/AIDS screening, helping with cervical and breast cancer exams and treatments, and other birth control type activities other than abortion. Because they do abortion too, this helps contribute in the milieu of their overall funding. With that logic, we wouldn't fund any hospital, any health clinic, or any doctor that any part of their practice or any part of their operation has anything to do with abortion, because the funds get commingled and it helps contribute to their ability to provide abortion. So the bottom line is, this isn't about Planned Parenthood. It's not the reverse earmark that it is that picks out only Planned Parenthood, including Planned Parenthood in Memphis, Tennessee, that provides health care to over 5,000 women a year, low-income women who need information about how to plan their families other than just abstinence, that we know from Alaska to Florida has failed. This is an effort to take away from people an individual choice and to require and make the government, this Congress, big government, the decider of individuals' lives rather than giving them some choice. We have a limited amount of time. I have 5 minutes. I have a little time left. Mr. Pallone, if you'd like to take the remainder of my time, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Pallone so we can have an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I'm just amazed by the extortion that I heard on the other side of the aisle tonight. Basically what the Republicans said is that if Planned Parenthood agreed not to perform abortions, then they could continue to perform their other functions. But if they insist on performing abortions, then we're going to starve them for money, and they won't be able to provide contraceptives and family planning and all the other health care services for women that are so important here. To me, that is an incredible statement, because essentially what you're saying is, we'll extort this. We don't really care about all these other services that they're providing. What we really care about is abortion, and if you sign on the dotted line, then you can continue to perform the other health care services as long as you don't perform the service that is allowed under the law of the land. Now, I cannot believe that that was actually stated here this evening, because I know, and we all know, that all these other services, reproductive services and health care services, are so important for women, so important for families. For me to hear a member on the other side suggest that somehow they're going to extort that and threaten that and hold that over everyone in order to accomplish this goal of saying that you can't perform abortions, I think is outrageous. And I now understand what the purpose of this amendment is. It's to close down Planned Parenthood and all the good things that many of you admit that they're actually doing, just in order to accomplish this ideological goal related to abortion. I just think that is incredible. It's, to me, Frank, for the first time, I understand what it's all about. But let's not be hypocrites about this. If that's what you're about, then admit it. And one person did. The rest of you are going on and on about all the terrible things that Planned Parenthood has done. And frankly, most of the men and women who perform the services at Planned Parenthood are very well-meaning people, and they shouldn't be attacked because of a few that haven't done the right thing. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've been a practicing physician for over 35 years. I've delivered hundreds of babies. And you know, our president once said, when asked when does life begin, he said, that's above my pay grade. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, it's not above my pay grade. And I can tell you, as a scientist and as a physician, that life begins at conception. And that's often forgotten in this chamber right here. Abortion violates the very tenets, the central tenets of our culture, and that is the killing of innocent life. But here's something else that you don't hear much in this chamber here today. How is it that human beings, how is it that Americans can decide to kill an innocent human life? And the way we do it is through dehumanization. That is, we think of that unborn baby to be something inanimate or just a part of the body. I've seen people get more upset about a dying pet than they have in giving up their pregnancy for abortion. So I say to you, Mr. Chairman, here today that I rise in support of the Pence Amendment. Yes, of course, money is fungible. Money goes in one end and then into another account and then on elsewhere. So anything that taxpayers do in terms of giving money to Planned Parenthood is subsidizing abortions. And we know that the American people, by a small margin and a growing margin, oppose abortion in general, but a wide margin of Americans oppose taxpayer funding of abortion. And with that, I would like to yield the rest of my time to the gentleman from Iowa.
The gentleman from Louisiana for addressing the House and yielding to me and all of those who have spoken on this issue. I recall back here on this floor in the early part of the session in 2007 when the Mexico City vote came up. And I remember that debate here on this floor. I remember watching the vote go up on the board, the language that would compel American taxpayers to fund abortion in foreign lands. And for the first time in years, the Democrats lost the debate, but won the vote. And I saw members over on this side of the floor jumping up and down, hugging themselves, cheering. Cheering because what? Because you had taken a step to compel Americans who are conscientiously objecting taxpayers to fund abortions in foreign lands. How could anyone cheer something like that? What was the moral standard that brought about such elation? It's a complete confusion to me to think that we can't even describe what this is. I brought some posters to the floor of the House Judiciary Committee last week that showed what dilation and evacuation is. It's dismemberment abortion. I don't know if there's anybody in this chamber that could actually witness a real abortion and stand there, let alone lend their hand to such a thing. But I remember buying the movie Silent Scream for my children when they were about 9, 10, and 11 years old, and sitting on the floor in the living room and watching 8 minutes of parts of babies be put in a stainless steel pan and having an inventory done of a little foot, a little arm, a little leg, a little torso, a little crushed skull, until all the things added up, and then they sucked out the places that were missed. That's what's going on. And we're asking Americans fund this through Planned Parenthood or any other organization. Here's where I'd agree with Mr. Cohen. I'd go further than this. He made the point, I know he wouldn't agree. I would say no funds should go to any entity that could perform such a ghastly, ghoulish, and gruesome procedure. And this House cannot compel American taxpayers to do so. And we will stand tonight and we'll put an end to the federal funding of Planned Parenthood, and we'll move on. And we'll shut off all of the funding to those entities that do that to unborn children in this country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say in conclusion to my remarks, and I thank the gentleman from Iowa, that tonight we're all getting tired. We've debated for 3 days and 3 nights. But in that same period of time, think about the number of babies who've been killed through abortion, through a sterile area where a doctor goes in and we have the usual instruments and so forth, and the fetus sucked out of the womb, and then the mom on with her life. But we also know that statistics tell us that these mothers don't just go on with their lives, as has been suggested by the other side. The rate of depression, the rate of suicide, the rate of problems with future pregnancies, they increase dramatically after abortion. So tonight should be the beginning of the ending of this horrible practice, and with that, I yield back to the chair.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Strike the last word, Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were hired by our neighbors and our hometowns to come up to Washington and fight for jobs and help get the country back on the road to recovery. But instead, this Republican Congress is taking an extreme right turn right back into the dark ages because they are targeting a very important initiative that has provided fundamental health services to women since 1970, to say no more will women that depend on family planning in the United States of America have that lifeline any longer. That lifeline for breast cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings, the annual pap smear, for contraceptives. We can't go back to the dark ages, and we're not going to let you. As often as it has been misstated on this floor tonight, none of the money for family planning goes to pay for abortions. This is their false battle cry. In effect, what they're doing is they want to cut off the lifeline for mothers and daughters, aunts, your friends, your neighbors, who sometimes don't have a place to go to afford that important doctor's visit. There seems to be little, if any, empathy for these women from the Republican side of the aisle, as they propose no alternative for providing this care, and they don't seem to realize or frankly care that unintended pregnancies will rise if this program is abolished. Cutting off these funds and eliminating this care for women will not stop abortion, which is their claim. Only family planning will stop abortion. The major consequence of wiping out Title X, which really means that all-important trip to the doctor's office for a woman who doesn't have any place else to go for their breast cancer screening, their annual exam, the only consequence, the major consequence, will be eliminating health care for millions of women while also increasing the bill to taxpayers. For every public dollar invested in family planning, taxpayers save $4. So attacking reproductive health care for women may make for very interesting politics, but it doesn't prevent unintended pregnancies, it doesn't create jobs, it doesn't improve the economic situations of our hometowns, and that's what we should be debating for hours and hours tonight. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado